Mr. Giuliani, are you ready for Colonel Waldron?
Colonel Waldron is our first witness, and I'll ask him a few questions, and then he will make his own presentation, and then, of course, you're perfectly free to ask him any questions that you want. Colonel Waldron, did you have the opportunity to examine any of the Dominion machines that were used in this election?
Yes, sir. Our team looked at some machines and software up in Michigan.
So you know that Dominion machines were used in Maricopa County to count the vote.
Correct.
And they were also used in Michigan.
Michigan, Georgia, Pennsylvania.
And the machines that you observed, took a look at, were able to examine, were used in the Michigan vote?
Correct.
Now tell us a little about Dominion. Dominion is a company that makes voting machines and voting calculation machines?
That's correct. They've got full end-to-end election, equipment and software.
And the actual software in the Dominion machine, is that Dominion software or is it someone else's?
Dominion is more of a hybrid. Over the years, they've acquired other voting companies, Sequoia and Premier. Sequoia was spun off of SGO, and Premier was spun off of Diebold as a result of the antitrust lawsuit.
Sequoia is the company that was involved in the very serious miscalculation of the Chicago vote in 2007, wasn't it?
I believe that's correct, yes, sir.
And they were using Smartmatic software, right?
Correct. And the software, the licensing agreements are pretty well. It's a good spider chart for all of these companies. They all share a common DNA in the software code.
And that company, Smartmatic, their roots are in Venezuela, isn't that right?
Yes, sir. Hugo Chavez was one of the founders, and invested, I think, 28% ownership in the initial setup of the SGO election systems.
And they have been involved in several South American elections that were fixed, altered?
Argentina, Bolivia, Singapore, Venezuela, Italy, several.
And just to simplify things, and we can make this available to you, and we have several witnesses that go back to that period of time who were involved in the vote fixing, who have looked at the vote pattern in Arizona and elsewhere and said that the pattern matches the way in which Dominion and Smartmatic, companies like that, fix votes. Isn't that right?
Yes, sir.
And let me ask you this other question. One of the former officials of the United States government, a gentleman named Chris Krebs, the former DHS official, shortly after the election, he made an announcement that many of these people refusing to take a look at any evidence are relying on. What did he say?
Mr. Krebs was the director of CISA at DHS, and he basically said that this election was the most secure in history.
The most what?
Most secure in
history.
The
most secure in history.
And partially that was because the states do an excellent job of validating voter rolls, and that this equipment is not connected to the internet. That was in his.
He said this equipment, which was largely Dominion and several others, is not connected to the internet. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, is Dominion on his council?
Dominion was on Mr. Krebs' Election Security Advisory Council.
And is there, and we'll get to it with the witness, is there substantial evidence, not only here in Arizona, but in other states like what we presented in Pennsylvania, that Dominion was in fact connected to the internet?
Are you referring to information other than the user's manual?
Well, let's go back to the user's manual. Tell them about the user's manual.
The Dominion Suite User's Manual is about 1.5 inches thick. My team went back to the user's manual and looked at all the instances where in the user's manual it tells operators to connect the Ethernet cords to the router, and it is the systems are connected to the internet.
And then what evidence do you have that there actually was connection to the internet?
Our teams looked at spider graphs of the Dominion network on election day and showed the increased web traffic, internet traffic on election day for Dominion servers.
So on election day, Dominion was communicating by internet,
Correct.
contrary to what Mr. Krebs said or thought.
That is correct.
And tell us now, how do they take us through how the vote can be modified, and then take us through what you saw in the machine in Michigan, where they did actually modify the vote.
So my background in the military, started off my career as an air cavalry officer, flying helicopters, counter reconnaissance. I moved later into information warfare as an information operations officer, running psychological operations, computer network operations, deception, operation security, and electronic warfare, special electronic warfare. And our team has been researching this specific issue since August of this year. We are working with another team that's been intently working on this voting machine manipulation for about 2 years when it became apparent in the Ted Cruz and Beto race in 2018, as well as the Kentucky governor's race with Matt Bevins. We saw significant anomalies in those races, and that's kind of the experience or our background working with this system. And I would tell you, as an unconventional warfare information operations, information warfare specialist, the American populace is facing an unconventional warfare scenario, and this is information warfare. The voting systems in the U.S. and Arizona, Dominion, and several of the other machines were built to be manipulated. And as the mayor said, they've been used in elections around the world with questionable results. And we believe that these same questionable results are present in this election. Again, my background as an information warfare officer is how to get in and corrupt these machines to conduct strategic influence operations. How do I get the enemy or a targeted population in a foreign country to think and act a certain way? These machines have multiple points of injection that are vulnerable, everywhere from the server level, where passwords, accesses are posted for the dark web for any hacker to get in and access them. And what they can do at the far right limit is download CSV files or like an Excel spreadsheet, change the columns, and re-upload them. And that can be done at the server level. At the operator level, if there's software, it can be corrupted. It can be manipulated with a device that is as small and as simple as a USB device, which these machines are booted up and run off of. So the little bit of history, and I can show you some charts on the DNA of these machines, but the common software goes back to SGO Smartmatic. As the mayor mentioned, they sold Sequoia voting systems to Dominion in 2010, and then Diebold spun off the Premier election system to Dominion as a result of the antitrust concerns. I believe that was also in 2010. So the bottom line is that these systems all have similar code and similar functions, and it's displayed in their operator's manual. So, I know it's kind of been, in the press, it's kind of been poo-pooed that, this doesn't go back to Hugo Chavez. But I personally debriefed the son of a Cuban intelligence officer who had firsthand knowledge, speaking with two of Hugo Chavez's family members that in the Maduro election, when the populist uprising threatened Venezuela's totalitarian leadership, that Hugo Chavez's family members said that don't worry, that it's guaranteed that their father invested the money to build the SGO voting machine system. So in a nutshell, these systems are not what you've been told, if you've been told anything. They are connected to the internet. There is no transparency of how the voter information is processed, moved, and stored. And as a matter of fact, these companies have refused to allow any type of inspection into their code, and they always decry, it's our IP, it's IP protection. But with the declaration, I believe, with Jay Johnson, was our Secretary of Homeland Security, he declared that the national election system was national critical infrastructure. So there is, I think, reason for us to understand the code and how these machines function and how they use our votes and process votes. The voting record is able to be modified, deleted, adjusted by administrators or outside threats, and those are also explained in the user's manual. Operators can assign votes for write-in votes, blank or error ballots in large numbers. So all of these votes, they could get put into a batch file, and then the administrator of that voting or tabulation system can say, okay, there's 8,000 votes in this batch file, or there's 5,000 votes in this batch file, and they can say, well, I think, this batch, we'll just make this go to this candidate. And they have that they have that authority in the user's manual to do that. Our team is not the only team that's working on this. There are literally hundreds of other small cyber teams that have weighed in on this. There are tons of statisticians. You'll hear from some of your Arizona citizens today, but we've been working in several states looking at these anomalies. But it's not a secret. DEF CON last year, I think the hacking teams broke in and manipulated these machines in under 2 minutes. So it can be done. It's easy, and there's very little security. So they can be hacked to manipulate votes. One of our white hat hackers discovered a malware on the server. It's called the Q-Snatch, that basically records login credentials and passwords. So if someone in Philadelphia, or someone in Maricopa County, or someone in Antrim, Michigan logged in, that malware will grab their username and password. And so you can log in. If you got access to the backside of that malware, you can log in wherever you are in the world to Maricopa County to manipulate. So there's multiple
Colonel,
ways.
Just interrupt you for a second.
Yes, sir.
So we get the point of this clear. You actually examined one of the machines, and you were actually able to see very, very clear changes in vote in the machine, correct?
Correct, in Michigan.
And it was down ballot changes. How many?
Correct. So the down ballot looks, it was there were changes in the election day vote on 11/3 to the recount vote on 11/6. Say, for example, the school board, one lady on the election day received 519 votes, and this was a very small precinct. In the post recount, they went from 592 to 852. The total votes went from 1068 to 1810, and the write-in vote jumped from 24 to 112. There was another proposition on a state proposal that jumped significantly from 700 votes on election day up to 1083 on the recount. So there are a lot of variabilities, and what we believe this is due to is the USB drive that was used in the election day versus the post-election recount.
Well, this proposition, when I see, I think we should give them a copy of this, make this available to them, because it shows on the day of the election, this is a proposition about the use of future revenues generated from oil and gas bonuses. And I take it was fairly controversial. So the first vote was 774 for, 508 against. The second vote was 1083 for and 206 against. Quite a difference. Now, how did that difference come about? How do you accomplish that difference? How does the machine change from after the votes are cast? What does the machine remember other votes?
So there's a card that stores the votes, and it's run against the algorithm that's put on the USB card into the actual machine and the tabulator, and that difference was basically the tabulation algorithm.
Why, excuse me for my ignorance, but why would you put an algorithm in if you have a vote that's 774 to 508?
That's
Why wouldn't you just look and see, was that the correct vote? Why do you put an algorithm in which is introducing an outside force to what should be an internal process?
to shift things how you like them. When you look at moving these algorithms around through the different precincts, you can achieve quite a number of aggregate ballot shifts. So this was one instance and one recount in one small.
So when they
precinct.
looked at the machine on election day, it was 774 to 508. When they looked at it again on the recount 3 days later, it was 1,083 to 206. Is that right?
Correct.
And that happens because of an algorithm, not because anybody changed their vote.
The elections clerk did write an affidavit, and they basically said that we'd followed all the procedures on election day as well as a recount, and these were the results that the election clerk.
We're also
posted
going
on
to
the
submit
recount.
this study. It's quite complicated. I fell asleep last night reading it and had dreams about internet surveillance and all kinds of things. I propose getting an expert to look it over, but it shows exactly what the colonel is saying, that these machines should not be voting machines because anybody can communicate. It's like having an open computer. Anybody can communicate with them and do whatever they want with it. So we'll submit this and this to you that shows you that that they can be changed, that they were changed, and then exactly how you can do it. Now, we know we're not saying it about any of the machines in Maricopa County, but we haven't seen the machines in Maricopa County, nor have you. This evidence is being submitted to dispute the lies that Dominion and Smartmatic are putting out, which is their machines are perfect, their machines can't be tampered with, their machines are tamper-proof. The reality is their machines are just the opposite. They're completely vulnerable. Is that right, Colonel?
And if you look up on the screen, that's exactly what. And let me see if I can. Do I need to put this at full screen, or is it a better view?
I think you need to explain it.
So this is a Spiderfoot reconnaissance tool that looked at DominionVoting.com network that was analyzed on November 3rd, and basically this shows vulnerabilities. It shows volumetric internet traffic, the raw data. It shows all the web servers, physical coordinates, all the vulnerabilities that are associated with the server. But basically, it does show that this was connected to the internet on voting day, and the volume of traffic was significant, and the vulnerabilities there are plenty of vulnerabilities that hackers could penetrate this system.
Can you tell if some of those communications went outside the United States?
We did observe packet traffic that were going from the U.S. Now, we don't know if it was specifically Dominion traffic going, but to a server in Frankfurt.
In Frankfurt, Germany.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor.
And who has it?
Colonel Waldron, could you just take a moment and explain packet traffic? Because there's probably a lot of folks who are not sure what that is.
So it's bits of information that are sent over the internet from in internet protocol from one point to another.
Thank you.
And what's in Frankfurt, Germany that would be of interest?
Well, we looked prior to the election, one of our white hat hackers, and found that there was traffic in a Seidel server. Seidel is one of the companies, and I can show you we mentioned before the interconnectedness. Not that one. The interconnectedness of these companies. So this is sort of a historical link to all the voting companies, and we got Smartmatic in the middle. It's a licensor to Dominion Voting Systems. Seidel runs election night reporting through SOE software and Clarity Elections over here. And Clarity Elections is if you click up on a lot of the county and Secretary of State voting systems, it'll pop up as property of Clarity Elections. So it doesn't really belong to the counties. It doesn't really belong to you. It really belongs to Clarity Elections.
Just to make it simple, a Dominion machine that I go in and vote, it is susceptible to easily having that vote changed from the outside, or by them in particular.
By an authorized user or an unauthorized user.
By an authorized or unauthorized user?
Correct.
As
a
well?
Hacker. A hacker.
A hacker. So my vote is only as good as the integrity of Dominion and all the hackers that exist that can get into the Dominion machine.
Your vote is not as secure as your Venmo account.
Pardon me? Say that one more time.
Your vote is not as secure as your Venmo account.
Can you think of any reason why anyone would hire them to count votes in the United States?
I could postulate a lot of...
Or any of them good reasons?
They have a strong lobby. They work with the government. They work with state government agencies, and they've got the infrastructure to sell their services.
Can you now look at, in reference to Arizona, the analysis you did of the vote in Maricopa and Pima counties that was reported? It's the Arizona fixing the vote chart.
So we notice a difference in Arizona versus the other states. Our team mostly focused on what we call spike analysis, which were an electronic inject of a lot of votes, and where the number of votes that were injected in a specific time period exceeded the ability of the scanners to process ballots and upload. So basically, it's a signal of a potential anomaly where we would want to go in and do forensic analysis on the ballots that were processed in those batches to analyze. The way that these systems work is that you can run votes in, run votes in, run votes in, and if you get write-in ballots or error ballots, it just accumulates them into a batch file. And there may be, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 votes in this batch file, and then the administrator or the tabulator can just go, okay, I'm ready to process batch file, bloop, and they send it, and then it records those votes. In the user's manual, there's ways that it shows that the administrator can vote that batch, in a 80%, 20%, 100%, however the administrator chooses, and that basically is a tool to allow them to move votes through the system faster. So Arizona was a little bit different. It had a pretty strong rise right up at the front, the first part of voting day, whereas the other states, and I can show you those, have a gradual increase in votes. And this may have been due to the fact that Arizona allowed early counting and tabulation, so those batch files could have been dropped in right away. But this injection spike at 8:06:40 p.m., and this is adjusted from Zulu time, so this is 143,100 votes that were injected. That was in excess of what the machines could have processed. The real reason that we believe that this spike was a little bit of an anomaly. And should I show the email that was sent to the Arizona legislature?
You have the floor, sir.
Say again?
Yes.
So this was an anonymous email that was sent to all members of the Arizona legislature, and it was also sent to DOJ. This individual sent the email, wanted to remain anonymous, but had enough concern that he sent this to the criminal division of U.S. Department of Justice. He did not want to be included in the investigation, but the information that they recorded was what we would like the opportunity to investigate on your behalf, or a forensics team of your choosing. It doesn't matter to us. But it says that please be advised that Pima County Recorder, located at 240 North Stone Avenue, Tucson, Arizona, in Pima County, Arizona, and the Democratic Party added fraud votes in the initial count to the vote by mail totals released at 8 p.m. on November 3rd, 2020. So this coincides with what we observed in the data analytics at that spike. We weren't aware of this email until after the fact. So there were approximately 35,000 fraud votes added to each Democratic candidate's vote totals. Candidates impacted include county, state, and federal election candidates. Through the utilization of the automated ballot count machines in Pima County elections, which were not Dominion, but they had the same pretty much functionality. My understanding is that 35,000 was embedded into each Democrat vote totals. Below are the meeting notes. In a meeting I was invited to by the Democrat Party in Pima County, Arizona on September 10th, 2020, no phones or recording devices were allowed. A presentation was given including detailed plans to embed 35,000 in a spread configured distribution to each Democrat candidate's vote totals. When I asked how in the world that will 35,000 votes be kept hidden from being discovered, it was stated that spread distribution will be embedded across the total registered voter range and will not exceed the registered vote count. And the 35,000 was determined allowable for Pima County based on our county registered vote count. It was also stated that total voter turnout versus total registered voters determine how many votes we can embed. This embedding will auto-adjust based on voter turnout. Because the embed votes are distributed sporadically, all embedded votes will not be found. If audited, because the embeds are in groups of approximately 1,000. This is so county recorder can declare an oversight issue or error as groups of 1,000 is a normal and acceptable error. So if you believe that your one vote counts for one vote, this is Maricopa County's embed totals will be substantially higher than Pima due to embeds being calculated based on the total number of registered voters. When I asked, has this ever been tested and how do we know it works? The response was yes. This has been tested and has shown significant success in Arizona judicial retention elections since 2014. Even undetectable in post-audits because no candidate will spend the kind of funds needed to audit and contact voters to verify votes in the full potential of total registered voters, which is more than 500,000 registered voters. This year, our Secretary of State has removed precinct-level detail for election night releases so candidates can't see precinct overvotes. This is what I have from the meeting. Just thought I'd report this. Not sure if you can do anything since I was unable to have a recording device in the meeting. Again, we hope this individual would come forward and issue this as an affidavit, but this is significant, and we also noted that the reporting numbers from Pima and Maricopa County merged election day votes with write-in votes with absentee ballots, so there's no way to, in the publicly available data, to parse those votes into the segments. And I believe we noted in a piece of information that was provided to you that Maricopa County had 1.9 million mail-in ballot requests. So, and those, there was a Maricopa County official on videotape that did say that they did not validate the signatures on the write-in ballots this year. So that's a 1.9 million vote fraud potential, even if it's 0.1% of the vote. There's a lot of room for error.
Could we just review that quickly for 1 second so we get it right?
Ladies and gentlemen, please, I know that you're passionate about this, but there are a lot of people in this world that want to hear this, and if we can't hear the witnesses over remarks, that deprives people of hearing the truth.
So what I take from your testimony, Colonel, is that 35,000 votes were embedded for each Democratic candidate in Pima County.
Correct. That is the allegation of this email.
The allegation by the gentleman who hasn't
Correct.
given us an affidavit.
Correct.
That they were distributed based on the voter turnout carefully so they wouldn't look suspicious.
That's correct.
And that's essentially what the Dominion, Smartmatic, that's essentially their modus operandi, right?
That's their
They don't just put
CTP.
in 10,000 votes. They put it in carefully so it's hard to detect.
They move the algorithms around to different precincts until they get the aggregate number that they want and need, and then they shift the algorithms to other precincts.
Did the Democratic candidates who got the benefit of those 35,000 false votes include Biden and Harris?
According to this email, it was all local and federal races.
So if that were true, then the result of the election is totally opposite the one that they're so anxious to certify. Correct?
Yes, sir.
Now,
and again, this
you would need
email
the
was sent to every Arizona legislature that I'm.
Now, we don't know if the gentleman is telling the truth or not.
Correct.
But would it be possible, if you had the machines in Pima County, to be able to see if there's evidence of this?
In order to do that, there would have to be a full forensic audit from the USB that drives the voting to the PCM CIA cards to the tabulators to the routers.
Well, I'm just asking, could it be done if you had
Yes.
the will to
Yes,
do
sir.
it?
Yes, sir.
If you wanted to find out if the vote in Pima County were honest or not, wouldn't you do it?
Yes, sir.
And without doing it, you really have no idea.
That's correct.
And the machines used in Pima County are different, but are they that much more secure?
These systems, they all have similar vulnerabilities. Our team focused on Dominion. Our partner team focused on ES&S, and they're very similar as far as vulnerabilities.
Now, did he say anything that suggests the same thing happened in Maricopa County?
This gentleman appeared to be an IT specialist in Pima County. So he only wrote allegedly to what he observed.
And do we have any knowledge that anyone from the state of Arizona attempted to look for him?
I believe the legislators, some of the legislators did try to locate this gentleman.
Anybody from law enforcement?
Not that I'm aware of. But again, I'm not law enforcement, so I'm not sure.
But even if you can't find him, you could determine the validity of this, or maybe determine the validity of this by doing a forensic audit.
Correct.
There's an available scientific tool that would tell you, I mean, did Biden get 35,000 phony votes?
That's correct.
And it's not being utilized, as far as you know, by the state of Arizona.
Pima County, I believe the total vote total was less than a million in Pima County. So it would be possible and feasible to do a full audit, a ballot audit. And I also was informed that your state, through the Counterterrorism Information Center and the DPS here in Arizona, do have the capability to analyze and validate ballots for ink consistency. So if there were mass-produced ballots in Maricopa County that were stuffed. Your DPS, I've been informed, has the capability to analyze those ballots for paper consistency and ink consistency. So if there were mass-produced ballots, you could determine that on your own.
Excuse me, Colonel Waldron. So I think what you're saying, and I'm going to repeat this back to you, these might be pre-printed ballots to simply move through the system. Is that what you're suggesting?
There are indications, we have affidavits from Pennsylvania that there were ballots that were pre-positioned in a bobtail trailer, a tractor trailer truck, okay. And that these ballots were, the thought was that this was a cache that they could go and grab the amount of ballots they needed and take them to the specific tabulation centers. And that's an affidavit that's from our Pennsylvania work. And if this
Colonel,
TTP is standard.
So repeat one more time the piece of information that I think people were shocked about, because it is hard to believe. Did you say that a Pima County official said that they didn't validate any of the mail-in votes?
That was Maricopa.
Maricopa.
They didn't validate the signature. They didn't validate the signatures on the mail-in ballots.
And that's 1.9 million.
Correct.
And do we know who that is?
I would have to get the video.
Well, could you get it for us?
Oh, yes, sir.
No, you don't have to do it right now, but before the end of the hearing. That would render every one of the 1.9 million votes absolutely never checked for fraud, deceit, mistake. And if they're mail-in votes, that can't be done now. They've been separated from the envelope.
Correct.
That would indicate.
So
those are basically 1.9 million votes that are illegal votes.
Or that had the potential to be illegal votes that weren't validated. The signatures weren't validated.
But can we determine now if any of them are legal or illegal?
If the envelopes were separated from the ballots, there would be no way to tell a ballot for candidate. You could still go back and look at the envelopes to validate the signatures, but you wouldn't know what the ballot.
And isn't that the reason you're supposed to have an observer when you do that?
That is part of the chain of custody procedures, I believe, in Arizona.
And when they talk about chain of custody, that's what they're talking about, right?
Correct.
Because a lot of witnesses are going to talk about that. So let's just sum up a few of the things that you also found. Tell us about the green button in Maricopa County on the machine. And there is one witness that's going to testify that all day she saw election officials constantly pressing the green button when somebody was voting.
So what that was when a voter wasn't sure, and I believe this was also linked to another witness that's going to talk about with the differences in the pins and the Sharpies, that the Maricopa Elections Division, in early voting, they specified that only use ballpoint pens for voting, and on election day, they specified only use Sharpies. And the idea is that as the bleed through on the ballot, as the scanners would cause an error in an error ballot. By creating the error ballot, the election officials basically would slide those votes into a batch file that could be adjudicated by the election administrator or the operator. And the green button was to say, okay, there's an error, but go ahead and push cast ballot, and it punches that into an error file that can be adjudicated by the election administrator.
Now, and you examined the voter database, and your team did, right?
Say again, sir?
You examined the voter database, you and your team.
Those were actually some local Arizona folks that examined that.
So you took that from
I spoke directly
state data?
with them.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
You spoke directly to whom?
To local investigators here.
And you have here voter database discrepancies. 6,000 voters, at least, entered into database with no sex and default date of birth, and they're non-existent in LexisNexis.
Correct, and I believe there will be a witness to discuss that later this morning.
So unless those can be discovered, those votes would have to be eliminated.
Correct, and it was explained to me that the way that happens is that you can register online for a driver's license. At the same time, you can register for voter registration. But the driver's license doesn't require the same information as the voter rolls, and so those kind of go into a queue that the Secretary of State would approve for the voter rolls over time. But there appear to be 6,000 voters that were on the voter rolls in the voter database with no sex and a default date of birth. So in other words, they entered 0101, 1900 or whatever that date was.
They also discovered over 2,000 votes that used a false address, an address of a vacant lot.
Correct.
You already told us about the 1,915, 487 mail-in votes that were not verified with regard to signature in Maricopa County.
Correct.
Also, in Pima and Maricopa County, Republican poll watchers were very often forced to stay outside, and unable to view the vote processing.
Correct.
And is there an estimate of the number of illegal immigrants that voted in the election? Has anyone done an estimate of that?
The American Immigration Council suggests that there are about 300,000 ineligible voters, and then one of the local newspaper reported that there were another 312,000, I believe, non-incarcerated felons and other ineligible voters.
Has any attempt been made to investigate that, to determine if they can locate a sufficient number of illegal immigrants voting illegally that would have a bearing on the outcome of the election?
That would really be done by the county election fixers.
But it hasn't been done.
Not that
and they're
I'm
going to
aware
certify the vote, apparently, without doing it.
I'm not aware if they.
It would be. You'd have to be an idiot not to think that illegal immigrants voted, right?
It's very possible.
How many are there in Arizona, approximately? Anybody's guess, but what's the lowest number? Can anybody help me with that?
Question for the local legislatures.
5 million? 4 million?
I wish we knew, sir.
Pardon me?
I wish we knew.
Mr. Chairman.
What's the lowest number we could use? 4 million?
Representative Cook?
Mr. Chairman, my colleague, Representative Townsend, and I have had several discussions over the past few weeks about that number, and she could provide that to Mr. Giuliani.
Mr. Chair.
Please, Ms. Townsend.
Mr. Chair, is this on? Thank you. And Mr. Giuliani, Mayor Giuliani, I can't tell you how many people are in this state that are potentially can vote illegally as an illegal alien, but I can tell you that there is a way for them to vote under the federal-only voter program, meaning that someone here illegally or a fake name, anybody that can put together a voter registration card with a fake name, or if they're not eligible to vote and are not in the MVD system here in Arizona, when they register to vote, if they're not found in the MVD system, the DMV system, they're not there, then they're contacted to see, do you have a birth certificate? Do you have anything to prove your citizenship? When they don't answer, then their name is relegated to the federal-only voter list, which there's 36,000 in the state of Arizona of people who can't prove their citizenship, can't prove they exist, other than when they show up to Election Day, all they have to do is show their bank statement, their title to their car, anything you can reproduce on your own computer with your fake name on there or whatever, and onto a bank statement, and you get a ballot, and you can vote for president and your congressperson and senator. So up to 36,000 plus people in Arizona could potentially vote, and I do have the numbers of who has voted in Maricopa County is 4,100 of the true federal only, and another 4,000 that are supposedly out of state. So those alone haven't been researched deeply enough to know, does that name even exist as a person? And are they here, is that someone here who's here illegally or not? So we don't know upwards of 8,000 people in Maricopa County alone who have cast a ballot who weren't able to.
Well, I mean, that's pretty astonishing. So I will say, and I may be wrong, but let's say there were 5 million illegal aliens in Arizona. It's beyond credulity that a few 100,000 didn't vote, particularly given Representative Townsend's explanation that there's an encouragement that goes on to have them vote. Now, every one of those votes would be an illegal vote. Every one of those votes denies a lawful voter of their franchise. It just wipes it out. Has there been any attempt to try and investigate that after the election, even on a sample basis, like going to a district where there are a large number of possible illegal aliens, and go back and check the names and see, were there 5,000, were there 10,000, were there 20,000? Has there been even an attempt to do that?
Mr. Chair.
None that I'm aware of.
Well, I mean, that's totally...
Yeah. Can I speak to that, Mayor?
Yes, please.
Yes, please.
You've been very helpful.
So we put in, 2 years ago, we put in an elections integrity unit in the Attorney General's office, and I've been on the phone with them, asking them what are they going to be doing, how can they look into this, and they told us that they don't have the authority to go out and look for a crime. They have to have it presented to them, so they can't go out and do an audit, they can't go out and actively research this. I also was told the same thing by the Board of Supervisors, that they cannot perform an audit above and beyond what's already been done that's in statute. So all we're really left with that I'm aware of is having, and as much as I appreciate this forum today, and I'm very grateful for you, we need an actual committee hearing. Like, I'm the chair of the Elections Committee. If we were to hold an actual committee hearing, we would have subpoena power to go and look at the machines, to look at these things, and inspect them, and get down to it. So we can do an audit. We just need to conduct a committee hearing to give us that subpoena power to be able to do so.
Mr. Julian?
So when this vote is certified, if that's not done, there is no question in any reasonable person's mind that the vote totals contain large numbers of illegal votes from people who are not citizens of the United States. The question is, how many? And the officials certifying have made no effort to find out the truth, which seems to me gives the state legislature a perfect reason to take over the conduct of this election, because it's being conducted irresponsibly and unfairly. And why doesn't your state legislature exercise its responsibility under the Constitution? What's wrong with that?
Mr. Giuliani, that is the essential question that we are here to ask.
Good. So now, anything else, Colonel? You did a great job. He's available for any more questions.
If you are done,
available all day.
If you are done, Mr. Giuliani, we do have a number of questions from the panel members for you, sir.
Good.
Yes, sir.
All right. The first thing I'd like to ask is, you spoke on system capability, and I know that much has been made of the excoriation of the state of Texas on the Dominion equipment, software, and all that. Can you provide just a very short comment on why they said, not only are we not recommending this, we're prohibiting the use of this equipment in our state?
In a nutshell, vulnerabilities that were issued, not addressed, and not fixed. There were too many system vulnerabilities.
Okay. And you also referenced a comment about DHS. And I'm struggling with, why did DHS say security for this election was the best it had ever been? Do you have any insight into that?
In my experience in life, there's generally two factors for individual. I mean, it's either competence or commitment. So they were either incompetent or not committed to learning the truth at the senior leader level, not at the operator level.
And does DHS know about the information that you've shared with us or that you're sharing with us in the process of this? Have you shared that with them specifically?
And much more.
So beyond what you're saying here, you've gone into much greater depth.
Yeah, we have relationships with our local DHS personnel in Texas, and both the intelligence divisions and CISA. When I started working on this project in August, I called them up, said, "You guys have got to come out and look at it." They did. They spent an initial 3 hours going through this data. At the end of that, one of them said, "I think I need to go outside and throw up."
Okay, besides that, did they do anything about it?
They had multiple follow-ups. They drove up to our Dallas counterpart team, received over 600 gigabytes of data that had been accumulated over time. Our team provided them over 200 gigabytes of confirmatory data, and they analyzed that. After they analyzed, there was a passive scan done. They conducted a limited scan and determined that there were vulnerabilities. They held numerous meetings with their folks, the CISA cyber side, and the INA, which is the Intelligence Assessment Division.
And I'm sorry, CISA, could you let the folks who are watching know what CISA is?
CISA is the agency in DHS that's responsible for cyber and infrastructure.
Okay. Members, any other questions? Representative Biasucci.
One note that might be important. Members of the elections division of CISA, I was told, would never attend the meetings or the briefings that were conducted internal to the DHS on the material that we had presented.
And I'm sorry, who is that did not participate?
The election security division inside of DHS.
Okay, thank you. Representative Biasucci.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Colonel. I just wanted to make sure I have this correct. So when we're talking about, it was Mr. Krebs? Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. He stated the most secure election in history. He stated we're not connected to the internet. He stated no votes leave this country. This is all things he's stated publicly.
It's all on the CISA website, correct?
Right. So are you willing to say under oath that you have seen the connection to the internet? You have seen it go offshore to Germany, Frankfurt. Are these things that you have personally seen and can say that is not true?
Our white hat hackers, yes, they have that traffic in the packets.
So why would he make that kind of comment, do you think?
Either not knowing, believing the myth, or not wanting the truth to be known.
Thank you.
Senator Borelli.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Colonel. I've got a couple questions on the Board of Supervisors. During one of their hearings, it said that the text for this equipment, that's, by the way, the county doesn't own this equipment. It's leased by Dominion and Smartmatic. But is it irregular? Is it SOP for the tech reps to be there during the election process?
Yeah, that's been something we observed in Michigan and Pennsylvania, whether they're full-time Dominion employees or contractors. There are Dominion employees that are there to run the equipment.
Because at the Board of Supervisors hearing they'd actually made comments that they actually provided them an office space in the county for them to handle this stuff. My question is, a couple of weeks ago they did a test to show that how the system was secure, so they did it before and mid and then after tests so everybody could see that the Board of Supervisors and the county elections that, see, this cannot, so what you're hearing is false. Obviously, or is it during that test, can they find the anomalies in there during that basically what I always call a dog and pony show? Would that show up in one of these tests?
In a forensics examination?
No, just see, come here and look at, this is how we certify the machines, calibrate the machine, whatever, zero it out, this and that. Obviously, these anomalies would not be showing up during that moment, correct?
Correct, and it's our understanding that Dominion had a software update at least in a couple states. I'm not sure about Maricopa County, but like the day before the election.
Representative Bartow, any questions?
I did have one question. Thank you, Colonel. Excellent information. You described web traffic increase during the election as opposed to how do you measure the increase?
Are you talking just in on the Dominion server network?
Yes.
They just look at volume of data that's moving through the pipes. And I'm not our hacker team they're the experts. I just kind of the big picture know how to answer, but they do measure volume traffic. Matter of fact, on the Frankfurt server on election day, there was a German cybersecurity professor that was noting that the increase in traffic was, and he related it back to COVID and said, we haven't even hit our indoors winter season yet, and we've hit the highest traffic. And he specifically noted that one of the reasons was the American elections.
Was it an exponential increase?
I don't think it's an exponential, but I think it went from 7 point something terabytes a second to 10 terabytes. So it went to a lot of, a pretty big increase, not an exponential though.
Okay, to my unqualified mind, I don't know exactly what that means, but it sounds big.
The volume jumped up pretty significantly on November 3rd and 4th to that particular server in the pipes.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
So, Colonel Waldron, so essentially about 33, 34, 35% increase?
I would have to go back and look at the numbers, but
something from 7 to 10?
Ballpark.
Yeah, that's big.
I can't remember the exact numbers.
All right, very good. Senator Gowan, you have any questions?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Colonel, you talking about the SGO system, and that was, you said Hugo Chavez, he was partial owner in that. Now, that's the beginning of Dominion?
SGO was a separate company, but Dominion acquired Sequoia Systems that was spun off of SGO. And they also acquired Premier, which was spun off of Diebold, but they all have the common core of the common code really goes back to SGO. And that one org chart that I put up there kind of showed the licensing agreements that go back and forth between SGO and Dominion. So it's the licensing for the software and the code.
So it still stems from the SGO system?
That's correct.
So, and then you're stating Dominion owns the data. So does that mean when they see the vote count that they own that, not the counties, the state?
They process it. They retain it. It's in their backup servers.
So they have the votes themselves as well, when that's supposed to be property of the state.
They've got the data. They've got the voter data, voter registrations.
And then you said Dominion sits on the board of Mr. Krabs. Is that right?
That was on the CISA website.
When you say the board, what is the board?
It was their Election Security Advisory Council.
Oh, okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Let's see. Representative Roberts, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Colonel Walton, earlier you were talking about the methods via internet and internal methods as far as, I think you used the term, I forgot exactly how you said it. There was basically methods from the internet and then also internally that there could be manipulation of votes. So my question is do you have any knowledge of were the machines in Arizona connected to the internet at any point in time? And if not, or if so, are there logs internally in these machines that if we were to be able to subpoena these machines and demand them so they could be examined, could we see all of those changes that were made?
So when you watch CBS, CNN, any of the mainstream media where they've got the live vote updates, that data is passed live. I mean, it's as the votes are updated. So it's, nobody's getting in a plane and flying the hard drive to New York. I mean, it's uploaded and it's connected. So it is connected to the internet, and whether it's locally, I mean, they can move votes with the cards, the voter cards. Those can be preloaded in laptops with the software that could be interdicted and upload fake votes, as in the allegation from Pima County, in batches of 1,000. They can scan blank ballots, and then the administrator can allocate that batch of blank ballots to one candidate or another, either in 100% or any percentages that they allocate in the, according to the user's manual.
So to that point, just indulge me just a moment. Would you say that is what we saw in the 2018 election with Governor Bevin, where we actually saw on television, real time, the movement of some 500 votes from one candidate to another? I mean, it was so stark. You saw them go down on one and up on the other on the exact number. Would that be a manifestation of what you're talking about?
So the working hypothesis from our counterparts on that, because they worked that and watched it, and they actually went to Kentucky to assist the team there, was that was a server level interdiction. So they went up to the server, downloaded a CSV file, changed the votes, and re-uploaded it.
Thank you. Representative Roberts.
So just to kind of tack on to what we were just discussing, it's my understanding, because there was an article here in Arizona from the Arizona Daily Independent, there was a quote-unquote whistleblower that was talking about issues that they had observed. And so one of the things they were talking about was that the data from the machines was being moved via the hard drive. So what you just described as far as the real-time data being uploaded and all of that stuff, just for the layman, that same type of manipulation, whether you plug in an Ethernet cable or what have you, or you're doing it on a user interface, that same type of malfeasance could be accomplished in that method as well.
And I think in looking at these systems, we identified, almost a dozen ways that you could inject or interdict to manipulate votes.
On that note, you said earlier that pretty much all of these machines have vulnerabilities. So is there any system out there that you're aware of that is worth exploring, or do we just need to go back to the paper ballot?
There is MIT developed a system with some capital infusion. It's a system called VOATZ, V-O-A-T-Z, and it's a blockchain type system. Again, it's when I first became aware of this, I went and talked to some friends of mine who were bank presidents, and I said, okay, why can't we apply banking principles? Because if you want anything done right, you go talk to the money people. That's who protects their stuff. And he said, oh yeah, and it's an app. You can do it as an app with tie it in with Real ID and a blockchain type solution, or the next generation solution. But there are systems, and I believe the VOATZ system is deployed right now. I believe and I know West Virginia is one that I remember reading on their website.
Thank you.
Sir, Senator Allen, any questions?
Yes. Thank you, Mr.
Please
Chair.
proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it. Thank you, Colonel, so much for being here today. I'd like to go back to the Board of Supervisors letter where they talk about certifying the Maricopa County election. And they have 5 points that they make for the reason why they call this a reliable election. And my concern is, of course, over the Dominion tabulation equipment. They said it was vetted by a bipartisan equipment certification advisory committee before the contract was finalized. and as required by law, the committee tested the functionality and accuracy of tabulation equipment before it was used in any Arizona election. Well, after listening to your testimony, that does not give me any confidence, because the machines, of course, can perform very accurately. It's after the fact, after the election starts, after the ballot is starting to be put into the machine, that these problems start arising. So is that accurate to say that this should not give us confidence about this being a reliable election?
Ma'am, anything that is software-based can be manipulated and changed with a click of a button, or, you got 2 USB drives, plug one in, and you get one algorithm. You pull it out, you plug another one in, you get a different algorithm. And we also believe on the connectedness, these can be pushed down from the top and shifted down. So think of it like a casino or a state lotto. Whoever owns the eye in the sky, you can control the margins. And that's really, I think, what we're looking at.
Well, certainly from your testimony, I can see that. And I have one more question, if I could, Mr. Chairman.
I believe Senator Borelli has it to that point.
All right, go ahead.
All right, please proceed.
Well, I was going to switch down to the 1% early ballots that they did, and I had a question about that. So, Sonny, if you have something to what I said before, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Colonel, so basically what you're saying, for example, since the techs are already there on site during the process, so if a machine jams up and naturally they call the tech over there to go fix the unjam, they could literally, without anybody noticing, because they're the techie people, they could stick a thumb drive in there and upload, change the numbers, manipulate, whatever.
There was an affidavit in Pennsylvania from, I think it was last week. A gentleman supervisor had a Ziploc bags full of USB drives, and they noted that he was inserting the USB drives into the machines at a much higher rate than would be necessary or that they had seen in the past. So, yes, it's very, very.
So now I have it to that point. Forgive me, but what I think you're saying is that they have just created an electronic footprint, either in the data download that you're seeing real time, that you'd be seeing some kind of a spike, or is there something that's captured on the machine that itself, like a memory card that is resident on the machine, not that is actually talking to the hard drive?
The machines, for the most part, at the voting machines, are just run by, removable software and data cards, the cards that actually hold the votes. The backup servers is really where the true story would reside, as far as the uploads, downloads, the change, the error warnings for the mismatch errors.
So would you be able to show with specificity a machine in Maricopa County going all the way across the pond, inserting data into a server? Or would it be an aggregate of all the machines that were in Maricopa County, for example? Is it by individual tabulator, or is it by the server here that collects? Can you help me understand that piece?
Let me, I'll...
That probably goes back to your headache graph, I'm thinking.
A schematic that sort of shows that.
The reason I asked the question is we're still looking for evidence, and if that is in the evidence package, that's certainly something that we would want to know about. If we don't have it today, something that could be forwarded to the body would be great.
Let me see if I can make this bigger. So this is Dominion voting, the high level. It's a block diagram of how everything's connected, and I can print this off and provide it to you, or whoever would do your audits. But it's kind of hard to see when it's blown up. But you've got ballot boxes, ballots taken out, and this tracks all the way through the image cast central to ballot images, and this is really what's voted. The ballots are scanned into these image casters, and there's an electronic image created. It goes into results files, and then it goes into validation, adjudication, auditing, reporting, and publishing, and then to Democracy Suite EMS, the Democracy Suite servers, the database servers, the document management servers, and it kind of shows you how this all goes out to the world from this whole system. Election data, this is kind of the top feed to all these servers, but this is really, it's a network. I mean, it's a computer company. It's all networked. It has to be.
So let me reframe the question. We probably would not be able to identify any specific tabulation machine showing up on the server because it's all aggregated.
Yeah, it's these tabulation machines go through this process, but the results files. So if you work it backwards from the server, you would be able to go back to a ballot image, an electronic ballot image.
All right, thank you. Senator Allen, you
Yes.
had another question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The other thing in this letter by the Board of Supervisors was they commented, again, of what made this a reliable election, that the election day ballots from 2% of vote centers and 1% of early ballots is required by Arizona law, and it yielded a 100% match to the results produced by the tabulation equipment. So that should give us, and all the counties do this. They do this hand count, this little audit of a small percent of the votes to see how it matches up to the machine. So could you explain how we shouldn't have confidence in that particular, how can they make that match up to the machine then when they just arbitrarily pick out 1%? If there's vote dumps that are happening and things that are happening throughout the process.
I would just say it's something we learned a long time ago, garbage in, garbage out. If you've got 1.9 million votes that the signatures aren't verified, and they're just reading bubbled in, ballot cards, then yes, the ballot cards, when they run 1,000 ballot cards through, are going to come out with 1,000. So that small batch would represent what those particular ballots say, but that's why there's chain of custody requirements. That's why there's verification requirements at each step along the way. So if one of those steps is broken, then the validity of the whole process is in question. You just don't know.
Right. Thank you. I think we're definitely, sir, in a new day when it comes to what is taking place across this country with voting, and we're going to have to probably really look at that. Thank you.
Representative Townsend, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Colonel, I just have a quick follow-up to some of the stuff we've been talking about as far as the security of the machines themselves. And as we know, whether or not something happened or didn't happen, I'm most concerned with voter confidence. And if there's all these holes, then we're going to really deflate or collapse voter confidence. So I would like you to reassure me on one particular item. In the tabulation room at the MCTEC here in Phoenix, in years past, you had to have a special badge, and only people that were certified to be in that room with the machines and the tabulation and all that were allowed in there. This year, teams of 25 adjudicators in that room in the tabulation room with these machines. Would it have been possible for someone in that scenario to wander over to the machine and have a conversation and put in this thumb drive you're talking about, or is it deeper than that, or something that's happened from remotely, or how secure are these machines? Because we know that there's no chain of custody on the hard drives, and the machines we saw in the video left alone for almost a week in one of the voting centers, untended, unsecure. How could somebody, a regular person with nefarious intentions, walk up and change this whole election by putting in a thumb drive and changing algorithms? That's something that could have happened, or we don't have to worry about that.
either an individual that has knowledge of the systems and how to, operate in the system could have an impact again from the server. They could be sitting in Nigeria, and as long as they've got an internet connection, they can get to that particular server. If they had access to, the data from the malware that's on the server, they could get the login and password from, a Pima County operator or a Maricopa County operator. So there are just so many places that they can be interdicted or penetrated. There's just too many to describe. But there's a lot of ways it could be interdicted.
Mr. Chair and Colonel, so what I'm hearing you say is I can't be confident that a volunteer of a political party that, the entire recorder's office and the elections director, everyone could have been on the up and up, and this is the most secure election ever, but if one random volunteer with the right information were to be in the tabulation room, could have then breached the security of the machine.
Correct.
And therefore, we cannot stand here and say we are confident with that kind of access to these machines left in buildings for a week. We cannot say with certainty that this is a secure election, and we have 100% confidence that nothing went wrong.
And you just brought up the chain of custody issue, and that's a critical vulnerability path. So that if the chain of custody was broken, then you really don't know. You can't say with confidence that it was a fair election.
And Mr. Chair and Colonel, last point. If you were in charge, would you want a recount? Would you want an audit? Would you want a do-over? What would you do?
A forensic audit will tell you what was processed, but to the mayor's point earlier, as soon as those mail-in ballots, which were 1.9 million requested, and I think a good percentage
Roughly.
return. If those signatures weren't verified, then you can count the same things over and over again, but you're starting with flawed results already. An audit, a full audit, would be able to tell you if those were bad ballots or pre-printed ballots. You could do a full forensic audit on the actual ballots. But once the envelopes are separated from the ballots on that many mail-in ballots, it's almost impossible to go back without doing a forensic analysis of each ballot and the paper and the ink.
Okay, and Mr. Chair and Colonel, do you have any information about potential shipments of ballots to Arizona and other places from North Korea or something like? Do you have any information like that?
There were several affidavits that were provided to the legal teams. I don't have those affidavits with me now, but there were affidavits and suggestions, and I think more of those are in process to obtain more affidavits on those processes.
Mr. Mayor,
Thank
can you tell us whether or not you have got, I don't know if you heard the question, or do you have affidavits that counterfeit ballots were somehow shipped into Arizona?
I'd have to look.
All right, thank you.
I would have to look.
Representative Cook, any questions?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you, and I'll make it brief. But I do have some stuff that I'd like to say is that, Colonel, when I ran for office in 2016, I got a phone call one day that one of our county recorder's office information had been breached, and all of the voter information was for sale on the dark web. That was my first instance of becoming representative about this hacking and computer stuff and what's out there. I just went through my third election as the top vote getter, and I would like to say that I continuously have been tried to be hacked on my personal or ledge account or whatever is out there on the internet. I later learned from people, Colonel, that the reason why this is done out of the country, and according to your graph, is that it is harder for us to track these people down and prosecute them when these computer anomalies and things happen from outside the country, inside our country and state. Would that be true?
We would not have the legal jurisdiction to go seize or search a server outside of the U.S.
Thank you, Colonel. And would this make sense that if you had a simple phone number and then you went on the internet and then researched that phone number of where you received a text message and it was from Ukraine, would that not be a red flag that your phone or information was trying to be attacked or infiltrated?
Correct, it would be.
Okay, so moving on to that, Colonel, what I've noticed is that about these voting machines and these plugged-in USB drives, when in fact, when we watch across this great country of ours, in many states, we have very few amount of counties compared to other states in here. You got to target 2 counties. If you notice that rural Arizona and rural Arizona legislators are up here, we're ready to go to work today. Our constituents demand it, and we demand it as their representatives to work for them to solve these problems. But what happens, Colonel, is that the same thing when we look at this country on a map and counties that vote for the President Trump versus counties that don't, it's the population and the masses. So I'm going to get to my point about Maricopa and Pima County. Okay, we all, in rural Arizona, we call it the great state of Maricopa because Maricopa County has more legislators at the legislature than rural Arizona does. If we add all of ours up, we still don't have the numbers to be an equal voice at the state legislature, but we have to work harder, which we can. So if we look at Maricopa and Pima County, if I was going to, now we're going to get down to vote centers, okay, targeted vote centers, Colonel. I wouldn't have to have a USB drive or to infiltrate every voting machine in every vote center in Maricopa and Pima County, would I? Or would I just need to target those individual voting centers in those 2 massive counties in the state to do what you are saying, to take votes and shift them over in those numbers? Do you understand what I'm asking?
I've seen analyses that boiled down national elections to zip codes, to just zip codes.
Mr. Chairman, I get fired up when I get into this stuff because I read and hear everything that these people have said. It has happened to me. And I just thank you again for your information, confirmation. But when I go back to the 2016 hacking, what I see as a pattern, Colonel, is that there is a plan. There's a larger plan, and it's not a conspiracy theory, and I'm not nuts. But if I wanted to engage in a plan in 2016, Colonel, would I not start hacking and getting the VOTA databases and information of projecting of why do we have, what is the number, 2,000 or 1,200 voters, I believe, in Maricopa County registered that I believe have voted at a vacant lot? I mean, if I really wanted to go down the road, isn't that the way you would target it?
Yeah, and again, it's you can interdict this in multiple levels and multiple methods, and I think that's what's happened. There's so much out there, and it's to your point, you know, you're not a conspiracy theorist, but it's really hard. They've made it so hard for the public to understand it, and we call that in deception operations ambiguity increasing. And
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Colonel, I have the last question is, and what concerns me over what I've read and seen is that could the data that you say could be traced back only to the scanned ballot at this point, so it can't go back to the individual voting machines, could that be bleach bits or whatever that stuff is? Could that be, could the tracks, the longer we take to actually get the machines and check these things out, could there be time to erase that information and cover up if there was a crime or misdealings?
There could, but now the batch files will go back to the precinct and the machines on the tapes. So you can track it all the way back to the machines and the precincts by the tapes, and it's what we showed in the Antrim County, those printouts on the precinct level. So that you can go back, but really all that's necessary to do, you know, there's not really a bleach bit. It's just pulling the USB drive out of the voter machine and the tabulators. So the machines themselves, other than the servers, really don't have a lot of resident information. The tabulation machines, they can have some stored images, but where you retain these, the federal election requirements require, and I can't remember the U.S. Code title, 46 rings a bell, but the 22-month retention of federal elections records, it would be done in those the ballot images and electronic backups. So the data is retained, and there you can do forensics on it as long as it's the actual servers and the actual machines.
Colonel, thank you for your time, your patriotism, and Mr. Chairman, I yield any remaining time I may have.
Thank you. I believe Senator Gowan has one more question, and I just need to remind the panel, time grows short. I think Mayor Giuliani has significant more witnesses and evidence that he'd like to have heard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Colonel, I just want to get on, come back to the Dominion situation here. Where are the backup servers?
I'm sorry?
Where are the backup servers?
I am not exactly sure. I can try to get that information provided to you.
And this company, I think the mayor said they were a foreigner company, a Canadian. Is that what it is?
So we know there are sites in Toronto. There are offices that are in Canada. So we know that there were data there. They also have servers in Serbia and other countries. But as far as knowing for sure where the data from Maricopa County went and resides, we don't know that. But they've got backup servers.
So an audit, because we talked about that a little earlier. First off, would that find where the server is and where the information would be?
Tracing the flow of the information, yes, sir.
The audit would do that.
Correct.
But it also tell us whether or not it's true or not that the 1.9 million signatures were or were not verified, right? So we would have an absolute
So that would be
Colonel, could you get a little bit closer to the microphone? I'm getting a lot of people who are saying, I can't hear the guy talk.
Okay. So the adjudication of the signatures on the ballots, that would be totally separate. It wouldn't be necessarily a digital forensic process, but that audit would be, have to be conducted at the county level on all the envelopes.
So if we did an audit, if we were able to do that, tell me the things that could come out of that.
Well, if the signatures on the envelopes were invalid, you could necessarily get a percentage of the votes that would be disqualified. But again, when the ballots are separated from the envelopes, you can't tell which ballot came from which envelope. So really all that would tell you is a percentage of that, the percentage of those mail-in or absentee ballots that were not legitimate.
So what could the server tell us?
The server will basically tell you all of the electronics. So once the ballots are processed, the batches and the images, that'll tell you where all those goes, and it'll also tell you any changes to the software, any updates, algorithms that were in place, and that's all present at the code level. And that's really what these companies have balked at, providing access to the code, because they say that that's their intellectual property, and it's they've been successful at preventing folks from analyzing the code.
So they're utilizing their system for our elections, but it's their property.
And counties and states have signed up for that.
Thank you.
Senator Borelli, final question.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and Colonel, just for clarity, not only can these machines be manipulated with a thumb drive and everything else, it can be changed remotely outside the voting center.
That's correct, and there are references in the user's manual that show how they can do that.
Thank you.
Mayor Giuliani, anything else with your witness here?
No, I think.
All right.
I think we covered everything.
Thank you,
Thank you,
sir.
Colonel.
Do you have a next witness? I'm looking at the clock, and I know that we've got a time management issue with one of our witnesses.
Yes, I think we should call Anna Orth
Okay.
because she has an appointment, and we'll call her first.
Okay. And then after that, Senator Pat Colbeck. We need to make sure that we have
Yes,
him at
sir.
the airport by 1 o'clock. All right. Thank you very much. Anna Horth?